the sex talk I wish I would have had. I think if I had had this sex talk, I would have been invested in my own pleasure. I maybe would have dodged SA, would have probably saved a few heartbreaks. I would have maybe, I didn't even hit on STDs. Ooh, maybe that's its own video. Yeah. Hey there. If you're an anxious mom like me, maybe you have been dreading having the sex talk with your daughter. I'm here with some tips, maybe not necessarily for your daughter, but it got me thinking, what was the sex talk that I wish I would have had when I was young? It's so easy to overthink the sex talk, right? We don't want to tell them information that they're not ready for and lead them down a path that we don't want them to go down. And yet, knowledge is power. And if we don't tell them, then we're really blinding them to something that is super important as far as like safety and really the whole course of your life. So, if you're like me and you're an anxious mom who wants the world to be safe for her daughters and sons and people, just want to say I made this video for you. Just cute little like mom story here. So my daughter's really into musicals. She's living out my drama nerd generation 2.0. And she's really been into Hamilton. And as you may know, there's a few choice words in Hamilton. And it was so cute because she was full blast singing, "The son of a bastard, no." Bleep that out for me. But if you know the line, you know it. And she was full on saying it, not realizing those were bad words or even what she was saying. And so I listened to it a couple of times before I worked up the courage myself. Being a trauma therapist, I'm really sensitive to shame. And I think for tweens and teens in particular, it's sort of like the more directly you talk about something, sometimes the more they clam up. So I'm sitting here going, how do I define bastard and okay, I wasn't ready for that conversation, right? We haven't even really gotten like the talk down. But these little context cues are coming up. And so that's just showing me that she's out in the world and needs to know the knowledge. So, again, this is not necessarily a talk about how to talk to your daughter or son about sex. If you'd like a video on that, let me know and maybe I'll craft some age appropriate suggestions. I've been Googling that myself, so I think maybe I'll make that for my own benefit. But it really got me thinking, what information did I need to know? What could have prevented me from having, harmful experiences? And what did I need to know about the beauty and elegance of my body and the power of being a woman? Just saying, Mom, if you're watching, actually, please don't watch this video. If you're watching, you did a great job with this. And I feel like my mom was, open to talking about a lot of things, probably more real and raw than most moms, particularly for that time. But there's a few things that, based on my own experience and having counseled hundreds of women, helping them heal from sexual trauma, having worked with many teens, I just feel like I have a few really important thoughts. If we want to label this, I think this is maybe PG 13 to 15. But it depends on your 13 to 15-year-old. And really, it's more for you, the anxious moms in her 13 to 15-year-old. Okay, we're going to get a little bit into it. And in no particular order, this is just kind of my stream of thought. And again, if you know me, again, hi, I'm Dr. Megan Monday. This is my channel about pleasure psychology. I'm coining that term because what women want most in their life is pleasure. We get caught in this people-pleasing, overachieving, caretaking trap that leaves us drained and pissed off and resentful. And we don't need that. We want women in goddess mode, empress mode, in their full pleasure and satisfaction and fulfillment. And so that's what this channel is about. So you can subscribe for more. But let's get into it. I heard with YouTube, there's this new like grandpa style video where we don't have to do all the cuts and all the bullshit. It's just like straight heart to heart. So opening my heart to you. I'm going to try not to make this a super long video, but this stuff is so potent. Let me know in the comments below if one of these points you'd like a whole video on, because I could probably talk about half an hour on each one of these topics. But we're just going to try to hit it real quick. And this is dedicated to my inner teenager because she was really confused about sex. And Okay, y'all, I'm going to give a disclaimer here. I am first day of my period. So the truth filter, like there is no filter and the emotions are flowing. So we're in full bitch mode. Okay. And that's okay. We're welcoming that today. I think it's perfect for this conversation. I want to do some hard hitting talks, not just some fluff from ChatGPT. And so that's what we're going for today. So come along with me. Okay. I'm going to start with an edgy one first off. Maybe needs a disclaimer too, but I wish I had known one that BJ's won't get you a man unless it's your husband. Okay, what does that mean? All right, let me give you a little context clue here. First of all, I'm in my 40s, so I am a teenager of the 90s. And if you are not from that era, just wanted to say that it was a very hypersexualized era, not unlike the generations that have come after, but it was just the beginning of the internet and phones. Thank God we didn't have cameras on phones. Thank God. That didn't come until college for me. So, y'all, listen, that's one of the main reasons why my teens come into therapy. So, just FYI, like, don't give your kids phones, basically. Maybe that should have been on the list, but it's hard to survive without them. I digress. But anyway, BJs were huge back then. It was the 90s. That was the currency because it was kind of a misogynistic vibe, not going to lie. So it was all about male pleasure, not about a woman's pleasure, especially if she was a curvy plus size woman. And so we just put that context to a lot of these here, okay? So, particularly for that era, that was something that was highly coveted. And yet it was very confusing because the message was like, if you give this guy what he wants, then he'll like you and love you. Spoiler alert. That is only true of husbands. Okay. So I think when women are young and they're dating, they're more forthcoming with the oral pleasure. And often, ooh, that was interesting. I say oral pleasure and it like swagged, but okay, whatever. So, anyway, I think that's to say that a lot of times women are overgiving in the early years, and then perhaps because of trauma, are undergiving in the later years. I fell for this trap of if I give a guy what I think he wants, he will like me. And that is such people pleaser. Okay, so I'm going to dispel that myth. And just to say that I think it is really important to, one, make sure that we have consenting adults that is pleasurable for both people. If that's something that's off the table for you, I totally respect that decision. And I think that oral pleasure, whether giving or receiving, can be such a huge source of connection and pleasure for people. And so I think give them to the ones who really deserve it, which in my mind is in a committed partnership. Okay. But a BJ on the first night, that's probably not going to get you a boyfriend. Wish I had heard that early on. Okay. Would have saved me a lot of heartache. Oh man, this isn't even on the list, but I feel like most people, probably from the past few generations, have learned about sex on the internet, often through porn or through chatting or sexting. And that's just not the best representation of sacred sexuality. So just want to say that while it's common, I feel like that's a really dysfunctional way to learn, hence the talk that we wish we really had. Number two, girls are an option. It's okay to be gay. As a queer mom, I wish I had gotten this message sooner. I think we've come a long way with this. The visibility is there. But back in the 90s, before Will and Grace came along, there was no visibility. And I do think it's important to not assume heterosexuality. More and more, especially in the younger generations, we're having people on the LGBTQ spectrum. And so this is a viable choice for people. I wish I had known and not wasted my time with high school boys. A personal disclaimer here, but I think I wish I had known it was only until much later in my 20s that I discovered the nuances of it. And I think as someone who's bisexual and has worked with a lot of bisexual folks, it's not always clear as gay or straight, and it sometimes can take longer to discover because you may just not really know that that's a thing or an option. So just want to be the permission giver here. Number three, rape is super common and it is not your fault. Okay. Let me say that again. Not your fault. Okay. I want you to think back to the sluts in high school. There's probably a good chance that those women were raped. Okay. So let me just blow your mind a little bit. Maybe you are one of them. But often the people we slut shamed in high school were actually victims of SA and survivors of SA. So I just want to put that out there. My mom did the best she could. She was stalked by a football player. So she said, watch out for football players and frat guys. And I would say, yes, that is a common offender. However, unfortunately, rape is super common and it can happen to anyone. So I wish I had known it was more common and what the warning signs were to be able to avoid that as much as possible. Now, let me say the only person that can prevent rape is an abuser. However, there are some things that we can do to make that less likely. This is kind of a piggyback on number 3. It's number 4, which is alcohol is the date rape drug. We hear a lot about GHB and being roofied, and while that certainly is a safety threat, the most common date rape drug is alcohol, and it is legal. And most high schoolers and college aged folks, depending on your background, have probably experimented with it, and it is one of the biggest risk factors for rape. And it is crazy to me that alcohol is legal and it can be such a destructive drug. One, I think it can bring out the worst in people, and it certainly plays a huge role in acquaintance rape, aka like date rape. Fun fact, I wrote my dissertation on rape prevention. So I did it on empathy, rape prevention treatments in men, and explore the role of empathy and rape myths and culture and kind of rape culture all together. And what I found is the more feminine guys actually were less likely to endorse rape myths. Preach to the feminine guys with the balanced feminine energy. We need more of you here. And actually, I think the younger generations have done a lot better with this. Although, in the age of Tinder and dating websites, I do think that the hookup culture is still alive and well. And I do think a lot of times young people are not recognizing that when you have sex with someone, you're opening up all your chakras and you are connecting with them a lot energetically in a connection that um, continues on. And so when I think of some of the people of past partners, it makes me cringe a little bit. Thankfully, I've done the healing work to release those people. But just to say, I think if you go into it knowing, is this someone I want to be connected to? That really helps you make the decision of, is this someone who's worthy to give my most sacred gift to? Okay. Number 5, I often have to tell my college women this a lot. If you're into hookup culture, if you're into casual and you feel like that's empowering for you, I can get behind that as long as there's not any damage being done. However, if you are looking for a relationship, I wish this wasn't true, but chances are if you sleep with someone on the first date, they will not respect you. Okay. It kind of is like point number 1 with the BJs, same principle here. And so wait till a few dates, get to know them. I see this all the time with my clients where they want to rush the dating and the moving in and just be like kind of shacked up, which I understand the impulse, but like dating's the best part. Particularly if we're dealing with the men's, make them chase you. Okay. Know that you are worthy of, the chase of effort. Okay. And holding yourself in high respect is the ultimate aphrodisiac. Okay. Number 6, shame is a setup for sexual assault. I don't know a woman this is going to be a little bit incendiary, but as I said, we're on the period. We're not mincing words here. Okay. I don't know a woman who hasn't had an unwanted sexual experience. And I don't know a woman that doesn't feel some source of shame about her body. Wish both of those were not true. Do they go together? Yes. So, what do we make of that? Well, the best I can say is that shame is a setup for sexual assault. For me, as a teenager that was bullied, as a teenager that was overweight, as someone who was like very shy and meek, it was totally a setup. I was locked into so much self-hatred. It tanked my self-esteem and it set me up for predatory relationships. So again, not to blame the victim here, but just to say that we need to really dial up the self-love. We need to dial up the self-respect. Just to give you a little DBT lesson, we have this little relationship triangle. In healthy relationships, we get our wants and needs met, we get respected, and we get to keep the relationship. If we don't get respected and we don't get our wants and needs met, and we are at risk of losing the relationship, that's a super toxic relationship. We don't want that. Okay. So let's deal with the shame. Everyone is beautiful. Most guys actually don't want someone super skinny. Okay. Have you ever like laid on someone super skinny? It's kind of a bony, uncomfortable thing. No hatred to anyone who's super skinny. Okay. But just to say that was the idealized shape. I know that it's changing a bit with a little more of a curvier feature, but just to say, I'm all about body positivity. So I'm not trying to hate on anyone here, but just to say, I do think we want to normalize some curves, some flesh, like that's the juiciest, yummiest part of sex, okay? Same thing for the fellas. We do like some muscles, but it is also really nice to just have that like skin on skin contact. So if you're someone who has, of course, had any sexual trauma and or has a lot of negative self-talk, shame about their body, go to a therapist ASAP, okay? That could really, dealing with that, raising your self esteem, learning boundaries, learning how to say no is super important to make sure that you're safe. All right, we're getting into some of the funner, more spiritual ones here. Obviously, preventing SA is something that I'm super passionate about. Thinking about doing a product line on that. If you know someone who's been hurt, or if you are someone who has been hurt, that's definitely been my life's mission, is to help women. I've experienced that myself. But I gotta say, I really love teaching the pleasure stuff because I've done 20 years of healing trauma. Now I wanna teach women how to feel pleasure. So, number 7 is love and worship your body as a goddess. If you've ever pulled the Empress Tarot card, that represents like fertility and abundance and the cup that overflows. And so, I do think that that's one thing I really want to pass on to my daughter is to love your body. That's it, skin cream on. Take care of yourself. Brush your teeth. Do things that make you feel good and sexy, and don't put harmful stuff in your body, okay? Don't shoot up your face. Don't put a lot of chemicals in. Don't do a lot of drugs and alcohol. I know people have different views on this. You do you, of course. However, I do feel like our body is a temple and we do want to worship her as such. And I think if we create that purity, not of like toxic purity culture, but just like the purity of innocence and a devoted reverence to ourselves, that can only manifest as radiant mental health and only good things. Okay, this might be a little controversial, but here we go. Number 8 is I do tell my clients this a lot. Don't waste your time on guys over 25. Okay, so may sound like a bit of a man hater here, which is totally not my vibe. But just to say, I do think that until 25, we have to subtract 7 years. So if we do 25 minus 7, that's about 18. Okay, so if you're trying to date a 25-year-old man, it's almost like you're dealing with an 18-year-old. Now, if you're trying to date an 18-year-old man, that's like dealing with an 11-year-old. If you're trying to date a 15-year-old man, that's like trying to date a math 8-year-old. Okay. Obviously, no dating of minors, of course, but just like emotional maturity wise, obviously, I'm super, sensitive to any kind of abusive or coercive relationships, and certainly don't mean it that way. Just saying that I think that women tend to mature faster than men, and men actually, even rape prevention research says the most dangerous time to be around a man is, I believe, maybe I should fact check myself, something like 15 to 21. Okay, I'm not finding the stat right here. So I believe it's like basically the teenage through college years. Okay, essentially. So don't quote me on the actual numbers there, but I've just found this to kind of be a good rule of thumb. Obviously, there's exceptions to every rule. There's incredible young men out there. I feel like actually the younger generations are a little more evolved. A lot of the men that I've worked with as clients are very aware of consent and respecting women and that kind of thing. So I don't mean to generalize too much, but in my day and age, it was definitely true. And I think it can sometimes still hold true today. So, particularly for my bisexual clients, I'll often encourage them to explore with women in a safer way first, and then maybe, check out men later on, but usually we do it sort of the other way around. Number 9, women are capable of infinite pleasure and vibrators are magic. So, obviously, the female orgasm is incredibly powerful. The clitoris has so many pleasure little receptors. It's designed specifically for pleasure, and we can have infinite pleasure. Okay. So I feel like a self pleasure practice, especially when you're in the teenage years, can be super important. And vibrators and clitoral stimulation is super important. And so I think recognizing that we are a vessel for a euphoric, I'm doing the wave here, but you know what I'm saying, the reverberations that go through your body, and it is an infinite source of pleasure that you can tap into, and you don't need a partner necessarily to enjoy that. It relieves stress. It's a great coping strategy. Recommend. Okay. And then my final one, which maybe this should have been the first one to start with, but I hit on it in some of the other points. I believe that sex is very sacred. I do believe that you connect up with the people that you've been intimate with. And I think it's a beautiful act that really needs to be with someone that you trust and that's sacred and safe and respectful and that like deeply loves you. Now, I know that that's not always the frame from which people are participating, but I can just tell you, as someone who's been in a monogamous relationship for 20 years, wow, like almost 20, um, it deepens as you go. And so I do think it just seeing the span of that with one particular person and just getting to know each other better and deepening trust and all of those things, it just gets more and more powerful. And so obviously, you don't have to be monogamous. You can be a serial monogamous. I've had many clients in poly relationships that were done with ethical polyamory. So, different strokes for different folks there. But I do think that it is a sacred thing. So you're not going to change my mind on that. I know casual can be fun too, but I do think that we're just dismissing that there is a sacred connection, whether you want it to be or not, that is happening. And I think that that's why trauma can be so traumatic, is when it is not treated as sacred or when it is painful or non-consensual or exploitative. So I hope this was helpful. This was just sort of like me speaking from the heart, getting it off my chest as far as what was the sex talk that I wish I would have had. And again, not to be totally incendiary here, but just to say, I think my main objectives are to keep women safe, for women to experience pleasure, and to have freedom of choice, while also knowing that sex is a sacred union and that we are sacred vessels and souls. And while it is a super fun, very can be spicy or even edgy experience, I think it needs to be done in the container of consent and safety and love, honor, respect, patience, communication, presence, mindfulness, all those therapy buzzwords. So, okay, that's it. The sex talk I wish I would have had. I think if I had had this sex talk, I would have been invested in my own pleasure. I maybe would have dodged SA, would have probably, saved a few heartbreaks. I would have maybe, I didn't even hit on STDs. Ooh, maybe that's its own video. Yeah. Tell me how you would talk to your kid about STDs without scaring the crap out of them. Or maybe scaring the crap out of them. I don't know. What's the vibe there? I think knowledge is power. So the more we have maybe uncomfortable but honest conversations about sex, the more that we can have a healthy view of sexuality that encourages pleasure without the shame, but also with reverence. So let me know if you think that any one of these topics would make its own good standalone video. I'd love to hear, and share me what you've told your kids about sex, what you wish you would have heard. whatever you want to put in the comments. I'd love to have a discussion down here. And let me see, what can I promo? Like and subscribe, of course. And I do have a pleasure profile book, which if you check the link in the description, you can learn all about your pleasure profile. I'll tell you a little hint. Mine is a thrill seeker, which back to this list, I wish I would have had early on because I was a thrill seeker and I needed to know some of this info so that I wasn't making reckless thrill seeks. But tell me down in the comments if you're a pleasure seeker and how I can help you with this channel, and download the free ebook. Bye.